Welcome, everyone. So, I'm going to talk a bit about twin flames and that concept. And this is partially because I get a lot of questions about this, and I'm always interested in hearing about what, you may want for me to write about or do a video on. So, feel free to ask. But I got this email the other day. A long time ago, you wrote a blog on twin flames slash soulmate connections. I remember it being a very different view compared to how many would understand these connections based on Google or mainstream thought. I've been trying to find this blog for a while, but can't. So my response to that. Many of you who have followed my work for a while understand that I am very upfront about the fact that it is an evolution of consciousness. And so, what that means in kind of simple terms is that what I believe or understand to be true now, based off of, you know, versus when I wrote my first book that came out in 2015 can in some ways be completely different. In some ways might be right on, or I might just describe it a little bit differently, but still have the same sort of concept. The same goes for my blogs and other writings. Many of those I have kept up. A few I have taken down because I have, with further, you know, consciousness comes the awareness of times where you may be reacting from a place of, well, reactivity instead of clear wisdom. And so my former Twin Flames blog was certainly one of those. I was reacting to a New Age conceptualization of it that was quite harmful at the time. That had come across my path. So it was one of those rare blogs that got taken down. I'm sharing this before I begin because it might be helpful for some of you to understand, or when you're delving into my work, or to understand why I might offer courses one year or stop offering them other years. And a lot of it goes into complex stuff about my own consciousness, and sometimes spirits or energies that I'm working with. So, but back to twin flames, less about me, more about twin flames. So, there are a lot of people that deride twin flames as a new age concept. It certainly has sort of veered into that sort of, surface level wounding that we might call new age. However, it actually has some pretty deep roots. And so I'm going to get into that now. Um, let's talk about some of the myths of twin flames. In Plato's Symposium, yes, I'm going to go there, get your philosophy hats on. Aristophanes describes a myth of human creation in which humans were originally of three genders: masculine, male having to do with the sun, female having to do with the earth, and then androgynous having to do with the moon. And so the myth goes as follows, that these three genders started to get a bit uppity. In fact, they even tried to storm heaven. And so Zeus, in response, um, split us into two instead of three, so kind of reformulated things. And he did this purposefully to weaken us. He thought that by being split into two, male and female, what would happen would be that we would spend our lifetimes focused on kind of interpersonal drama, focused on finding our other half, rather than, doing something like trying to, climb into the heavens or be focused on more spiritual concerns. And in a lot of ways, he was very right. If you look at the world with any sort of perspective, you can see that the vast majority of us are sort of locked into our petty squabbles, our interpersonal dramas, or sort of black and white thinking. If you've taken my shadow work course, you know that a lot of people are just pushing their own dissatisfaction with themselves, their own misery out into the world. And we can see this quite readily on the internet these days. Look at any comment section. You will see it filled with people who are doing anything to not face their own suffering. And so what do? They push it onto the other. And so the world is a reflection in this way. And what we see in the other, especially kind of the other half that we're looking for, has both our best and our worst qualities. And so Plato goes on and talks about the different facets of love, in that on one level, there's these sort of petty squabbles and animalistic sort of lust that we can get into when seeking our partner, when looking for our other half, so to speak. Then he talks about another level, which he goes into talking about love, which is wonderful, that genuine connection, that genuine outpouring of love between one person and another. But the highest sort of love for him is a love that is focused on truth. And by that, I truly think that he means love based off of clarity. You know who the other person is, they know who you are, without any of kind of the lower stuff cluttering up sort of the playing field, so to speak. So there is sort of a naked beauty, a truth that happens in relationships that have a sort of beauty, that have the beauty of truly finding your other half. Let me get into some other myths before I talk about the difficulty of thinking about twin flames or believing in twin flames. So in Plato's view, just to recap, that thought of truth, of goodness, of beauty that happens with that sort of purity of love when we find our other. Zeus has sort of split us in half, so when we can find wholeness through finding that pure love with another human being. Similarly, Aristotle thought that love is a single soul that inhabits two bodies. And so when we are talking about these concepts, there can be a thought of, oh, in order to find wholeness, I need to find another person. I need to find my twin flame. I need to find my twin soul. And I will say that finding somebody where you can find that sort of unconditional, pure love is a truly beautiful thing. But let's go to the thought of psychology before I go into more esoteric thoughts. In psychology, falling in love is considered a form of projective identification, kind of a heady phrase. But basically, what that means is that we project onto our lover, onto our partner, onto our husband or wife, um, our ideas of wholeness. And so this can be exalting somebody, the person that you're with, onto a pedestal, or it can mean projecting onto them like they are a threat or a form of chaos. And so in this other, we see our own well-being, or we see the root of what is preventing us from becoming whole. And so this phase in psychology does not last very long. It's typically when people first start falling in love, is that we either exalt them or we kind of, see all of our negative characteristics, all of the things that are holding us back, all of our projected shadows onto them, for better or worse. And so I am bringing all of these views together because when we are talking about twin flames, it is pointing to a singular spiritual truth that all of us are looking for some semblance of wholeness. It is also pointing to the truth that for most of us, in order to find the purity of that heart chakra opening, that we need to have that love reflected outwards onto an object and another person, and have that reflected back to us by them. So see that love kind of moving back and forth. And ideally, that would not just be, kind of the animalistic lust or even the first stirrings of love that are more conditional, but that purity and truth of love, that soul level love, so to speak. And that can ignite something within ourselves, something pure, something opening the heart chakra, something and opening up our systems to greater wholeness within ourselves. So let me talk about one more myth and a symbol, and then I will get into my thoughts, unvarnished, about what people are saying when they are talking about twin flames, because it can mean a couple of different things. So, as many of you know, I have a background in Chinese medicine, which has its roots in Taoism. One of the primordial symbols of creation is the yin yang symbol. And it is darkness on one half, light on the other, and in each there is a circle. So, in the dark part, there is a circle of light. In the light part, there is a circle of dark. And this is a primordial symbol of creation because, in many ways, it keys into a deep spiritual understanding of the twin flames myth, what it is really about. And on that deepest of spiritual levels, what the twin flames mythology is about being whole within ourselves rather than looking for somebody out there. We can find wholeness within ourselves. And so this is about finding the darkness and the light within ourselves to become a whole human being. And what happens at that point, if we realize that we are both yin and yang, masculine and feminine, as well as androgynous, that we have that whole continuum within us. What happens is that binary reality sort of collapses, and we go into the voids, the darker light voids, and those collapse. And then from that point forward, what we can find is stillness, is divine pulsation, is the spiritual heart opening until we can find kind of that divine pulsation that feels essentially like we are in the womb of the universe hearing its heartbeat. So, as far as I know, as far as I am aware at this point, that is our final resting place. You may be interested in my series of chakra videos in which I kind of take you through all of the layers of awakening, all of the perspectives of awakening, going through each chakra. And then I start talking about the crown and the Bindu point, going into the voids and the opening of the spiritual heart. And one of the ways that we very much get to open and come into wholeness is by interacting with the world, is by recognizing that each person that we meet is a part of ourselves. And most people never get to that point. They other their own self-like, their own self-dislike, their own hatred of themselves. They also disown the masculine or feminine principles of themselves onto another. And but there is a positive aspect to projection that needs to be understood. And that is we project in order to have relationships of depth. If we did not project, we would have no relationships at all. And so, what those projections can do is allow for us to observe our shadows, first of all, both dark and light. It can also allow for us to have experiences that would be difficult, if not impossible, to have within. So, the experience that many of us need of being loved truly needs to come from without before it comes from within. And so, ideally, we would all get to that Platonic ideal of having that true, pure love of experience, of expression in what might be called a twin soul or a twin flames, somebody that can truly see us and loves us for every aspect of who we are. And in that way, that can awaken us further to the point where we can feel all aspects of ourselves awaken and open without the need for anyone or anything outside of ourselves to awaken us any further. So let's take things a little bit deeper into that myth I'm talking about. This is a Babylonian myth of creation. And so, out of the sort of formless void, which is described in that Babylonian myth as Tiamat and Apsu, basically salt and sweet water. So basically a giant ocean of chaos. Out of that arises order. And so out of that arises the gods and eventually humanity. One of those gods was named Marduk. Marduk, as a sun god, as the masculine principle, then goes to war with Tiamat and splits her into two. And then further goes and organizes, creating sky and earth, organizing the cosmos. And the reason that I'm sharing this, other than a love for that myth, a love for Tiamat, is to really understand on a spiritual level the interplay of yin and yang, the interplay of twin souls, twin spirits, is that at the base of our being is truly this chaos, is our own inner Tiamat or Apsu. And we do everything we can from settling in, from accepting our chaos, from accepting our suffering, from looking it right in the face. We attempt to create all sorts of organizations that explain the unexplainable, all forms of body work and horoscopes and astrology and all of these things. And many of them contain religions, spiritualities, and many of them contain many truths. But a lot of them are attempting to control and corral our own experience of that dark feminine, that experience of that primordial chaos, those waters that are at the base of our being. And so, why am I sharing this in a Twin Flames video? Is because if we go to the baseline of our being, it is those two opposing forces, the sun and the moon, the waters, of course, aligned with the moon. And the split between the part of ourselves that is associated with Tiamat, the struggle, the darkness, the body, everything I talk about in terms of the dark feminine, versus the part of ourselves that is that sun god that is seeking to split that chaos into parts, to control it, to rectify it, to split it more and more, to make it known. One of the deepest things that I've learned in my path, and I'll share it here, we'll see who who listens, is that if we are willing to sit with our own chaos, the root of that feminine principle, that sort of formless void, that whirlpool that we all get sort of sucked into from time to time, that we can find that stillness, that love within. Until that time, what happens is that we look outwards for the love, for the caring, for the support, for something to calm our inner chaos, to give meaning to our suffering. If I go back to Plato's and Aristophanes for a moment, really the thought of splitting humans into two parts really was to weaken them, because then people are looking outwardly for something that they could find within. They, instead of looking for meaning, for purpose, for wholeness, for empowerment within, they're looking to receive it from another. So let me simplify things here for a moment. When I hear people talking about twin flames, typically there are one of a couple of things going on. The first is that they are in that projective identification part of the relationship. They are feeling the good feelings, the animalistic love, lust, the pull towards one another, the wanting to be around one another all of the time. That initial spark that people feel at the beginning of a relationship that pulls you to another person, that makes you, really want to connect to that person, body, mind, and soul in a variety of ways. And so that flame will tend to, kind of, once you get to know a person, once you get to see them in everyday reality and go through some periods of suffering with them, that flame that is so present in the beginning tends to die out. And so we even have expressions like rekindling the flame and stuff like that. In a glass half full perspective about that, I will say is that there is so much peace and stability and connection to be had beyond that point in a relationship. If somebody is ready and willing to understand that the initial flame dims a bit but can still be present. The other way I see people utilize the word twin flames is just to describe a really chaotic relationship. And these are typically people who feel drawn to one another because of childhood wounding. Put in simpler terms, they are repeating their childhood home. Most likely, they are finding somebody like their father or their mother to be in a relationship with. And that is why they feel such a pull towards the person. They are repeating their wounding, and that in itself is spiritual, and it should be something that should be healed. But there can be a lot of interest there, as well as a lot of chaos. And some people create a lot of chaos in their lives, either because they are used to it, um, because they had a lot of chaos in their childhood homes, or because creating chaos out of insecurity, out of depression, out of self-hatred and self-loathing can kind of, again, displace energies. It can push energies onto the other person rather than dealing with the suffering within. It's so easy in any of our relationships to project our unowned parts onto another person. to create chaos in situations with them, to distract ourselves from our own inner worlds. Another common thing I see about twin flames, I would say that this is fairly common, is that what people are talking about twin flames is really talking about karmic relationships. And what that means is meeting somebody and feeling that sort of kinship with them, like, oh, I have known you before. We have met before. And that is because you have. You know, I will say that a lot of karmic relationships, some of them can be extraordinarily wonderful. Here is somebody that you are coming through into this lifetime with, um, to help awaken you further, where you both can awaken one another. That is the highest form that karmic relationship, somebody coming through to be your partner, be your teacher, be your guide, to help kind of instigate the awakening process, to be a catalyst to one another. That can be a part of twin flames that derives from kind of those karmic relationships. What I see a lot of, though, are karmic relationships in which, in a past life, you may have been sisters or mother, father, or lovers, or something like that, where things did not go well. And so, what happens again is a lot of chaos, a lot of wounding patterns, a lot of living out of a repeating loop. Basically, from the past life, something happened that was unfortunate, traumatic, troubling, stressful, overwhelming to the point that it could not be resolved in that life. So it was carried forward. And so this needs a decent spiritual healer to help work with. Awareness of it simply isn't enough. The loop needs to be broken. And what happens when that loop is broken is that the relationship can get healthier and there can be a lot of love and resolution there, or it may fall apart because the only thing holding you together was the pain from the past life. I would say that the purest form of twin flames that a lot of people are touching on is that thought of two souls coming together that were once one, that are on the same wavelength, that can both find wholeness by finding one another. That is really the purest form of things. But even in those cases, in all of the cases that I'm talking about, and why I even talked about yin and yang and, all of those primordial myths, but, it's easy to get me going on, mythology and that sort of stuff, is because all of these principles are within ourselves. Even if we do find somebody that we would describe as our twin flame, that truly is a catalyst for love, for passion, for healing, for that truest form of love where we can truly be ourselves with them and be seen and unconditionally loved for that purity of love that arises from this twin flames concept that I think a lot of people are really looking for, um, is that ultimately all of our projections, ultimately all of our parts, all of our shadows, even the part of ourselves that we are projecting outwards, basically all of our parts, we are meant to find wholeness within. We may need another to get us there. Maybe a twin flame, it may be a teacher, it may be a guide, it may be a book, it may be a healer of some variety, whatever it is. The concept of twin flames, even when we are talking about, Babylonian, Sumerian myths, even if we're talking about the origins of Plato and Aristotle, is that we can feel that energy, that love reflected back to us, so that we can feel it within our own souls and become whole and complete within ourselves. And so ultimately, all of this twin flame stuff is intended to lead us to our own wholeness, in which We may still be in great love with somebody, have that purity of love with somebody, but we feel whole and complete within ourselves. So I will say that some people truly dislike the twin flames concept because there's a lot of delusion out there. There's, in fact, like a documentary out there and, one of those streamers about people who twist the twin flames thing into something for really wounded and naive people. And so it is always best to practice discernment with ourselves and with our relationships, and to recognize that we can grow and learn from many relationships, that we can become whole and complete within ourselves in many relationships, both human and spiritual. And that at the end of the day, to find wholeness within ourselves on a spiritual level, that we find the whole continuum within ourselves, masculine, feminine, androgynous, as well as look at whatever in us is disconnected from the earth, from the sky, from within ourselves, to other people, to the divine, and that ultimately we can eventually go to that level of questioning what within us is still in chaos, what within us is still in conflict, what in us is not love. And we can look at those things and work on them within ourselves in order to heal and become whole. And that will take us much further than clinging on to even the most enlightened of origin myths or the twin flames mythology.